is agreed to.
Impress Supply, second for 2012-13 Bill, third reading.
Call on Government Orders of the Day, numbers 2 and 3.
Exclusive Economic Zone and Continental Shelf Environmental Effects Committee Stage continued. Taxation, Annual Rates, Returns Filing and Remedial Matters Bill, Committee Stage.
I declare the House in Committee for further consideration of the Exclusive Economic Zone and Continental Shelf Environmental Effects Bill and for consideration of the Taxation, Annual Rates, Returns Filing and Remedial Matters Bill. Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Speaker. Members, the Housing Committee on the Exclusive Economic Zone and Continental Shelf Environmental Effects Bill and the Taxation, Annual Rates, Returns Filing and Remedial Matters Bill. Members, when the committee last considered the Exclusive Economic Zone and the Continental Shelf Environmental Effects Bill, we had reached Part 1A. Gareth Hughes had the call and has 4 minutes, 42 seconds remaining if he so wishes. I call Grant Robertson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just returning us to Part 1A, and when we left this during our last exciting instalment, we were looking, particularly on this side of the House, around some elements of the Minister's substantial SOP number 100, and in particular some questions had been asked of the Minister around both the impact of new clause 17A and also around the meaning of the new clause or the replaced clause 17.3. And on the latter, the Minister, I think the last time we were doing this, was acknowledging that there was no intent in this to create a situation of a continuous loop of an application where an application, if it were incomplete, would be returned and the person would now then be able to put in a new application and that would then start the process again. And the concern that we had is that Section 42 of the bill, which is covered by the new clause 17.3, we didn't think was sufficiently clear to allow people to be able to understand the way in which the process would work for incomplete applications. So I think the Minister at that time was going to go and get some advice on whether or not it was an SOP, a further SOP was required to give that clarity about what happens with an incomplete application. Section 42 of the bill talks about the Environment Protection Authority returning an incomplete application if it decides it does not include an impact assessment that complies with Section 40. The EPA must return an incomplete application and give the applicant a written explanation for its finding that the application is incomplete within 10 days after the application is received. Under the clause 17.3, that incomplete application then becomes a new application if it's resubmitted. And so we were seeking some clarity from the Minister around whether or not there needed to be further changes made to ensure that there was an understanding that this is a process that couldn't simply go on and on ad infinitum with incomplete applications being returned and new applications being put in. So we would appreciate some clarity from the Minister on clause 17.3. The other matter is around the new clause 17A, which essentially says that planned petroleum activities can commence and continue under this law. And my colleague Moana Maki raised the concern about the Petrobras application off the east coast of New Zealand, where they have had approval for seismic activity, but would this clause mean that they could move to drilling without having to go through under the new rules? And we haven't actually had a response yet from the Minister to indicate whether or not that is in fact the impact of the new clause 17A, because obviously it's a concern for us. We're not just talking about existing activities here, this is about planned activities. And we on this side of the House want to ensure that we understand what this clause means, and it would provide to us significant concern if indeed a planned activity meant that in the case of Petrobras, just because they'd got the approval around seismic work, does that mean that they have a continuing approval for drilling, rather than having to go back to the new processes that are established under this bill? So they are the two concerns that we've got around the new Part 1A. I hope the Minister is going to be able to respond to us to indicate whether or not she is looking at some amendment to Clause 17.3 and to clarify the meaning of Clause 17A, because a planned activity is quite a different thing from an existing activity, and certainly people on the east coast of New Zealand have had significant concerns about what Petrobras has been doing, and would be very alarmed to learn that just because they had approval for seismic surveys and seismic testing, that they would then be able, under this clause, to go on and move to drilling. That kind of loophole is something that on this side of the House we're very concerned to make sure we're not putting in. We expressed our concern at having this SOP given at short notice. Hopefully the Minister's had time in the interim period to answer some of our questions, and I look forward to the Minister taking a call and answering those two questions.
Chairman.
Honourable Amy Adams.
Mr. Chairman.